The accident happened before he got there.
Right.
And you can tell it's at least 2-3 seconds he was behind it.
It's horrible. I don't even know who to point the finger at in this situation.
He was an innocent man, and at least know that he has that as he rests.
This video discusses a tragedy involving the loss of 2 lives and is meant to examine responsibility. And as a result, some people might get triggered as a result of the contents of this video. If you're disturbed by such content, this is your opportunity to click off of the video. Today we need to talk about one of the most tragic stories in college football from the past year and how ESPN managed to make it even worse. This is the story of Kyren Lacy, and I need to warn you right now, this story is heartbreaking on multiple levels. We're going to talk about 2 lives lost, a promising career destroyed, and how the rush to get content out fast led to one of ESPN's biggest reporting failures in recent memory, resulting in multiple apologies from Ryan Clark.
I apologize. Kyren Lacy was innocent.
Pat McAfee.
We apologize for adding any more heat because obviously it's tragically sad and involves an athlete's legacy.
And even Scott Van Pelt.
Is that this was a senseless tragedy in December. I apologize for the incomplete reaction that aired on this show on Monday night.
But before we get into what ESPN did wrong, we need to understand the full story of what happened to Kyren Lacy, because this isn't just about bad media coverage, this is about a real person, real consequences, and real families that are grieving. So let's start from the beginning. Kyren Lacy was a star wide receiver for LSU. In 2024, he caught 58 passes for 866 yards and shared the SEC lead with 9 touchdown receptions in 12 games. He finished his college career with 162 receptions for 2,360 yards and 26 touchdowns in 64 games. Playing at Louisiana from 2020 to 2021 before transferring to LSU for 2022 to 2024, Kyren was viewed as a legitimate NFL prospect. Not a surefire first-round pick, but a guy that could definitely get drafted and make a roster. And then everything changed on December 17th, 2024. Around noon on that day, Kyren Lacy was driving southbound on Louisiana Highway 20, about an hour outside of New Orleans, in a green Dodge Charger. What happened next would change multiple lives forever. According to an arrest warrant affidavit dated January 8th, police said that Lacy's 2023 Dodge Charger was traveling south at an extremely high rate of speed in a posted 40-mile-per-hour speed zone, passing 4 vehicles, including an 18-wheel truck with a trailer, on a highly congested road. And here's the critical detail: he was passing vehicles in a no-passing zone. Now, what happened next is where things get complicated, and it's important to understand the sequence of events. As Lacy's vehicle attempted to pass, it allegedly rapidly approached a northbound pickup truck. The affidavit said that the pickup driver took emergency action by braking and driving off of the roadway to the right, coming to a controlled stop. Police said the driver behind the pickup steered left to avoid a head-on crash with a rapidly approaching Charger. That evasive maneuver, the driver swerving left to avoid Lacy's car, put that vehicle directly into oncoming traffic. The result was a head-on collision that killed 78-year-old Herman Hall, a Vietnam veteran from Thibodaux, Louisiana. Lacy's car never actually collided with another car, and that detail is going to become really important later. After the crash, police said that Lacy fled the crash scene without stopping to render aid or call 911. But here's an interesting detail. Louisiana State Police said that evidence supports that less than 10 minutes after the crash, Lacy's first outgoing phone call was to a Baton Rouge area personal injury and defense attorney. Police also said they used 21 separate video cameras to capture the uninterrupted path of the Charger from a crash scene to a business 11 miles away. So this wasn't a case where they had limited evidence. They tracked his vehicle extensively after the incident. On police body cam footage from the scene, one witness said a green Charger caused all of this. Multiple witnesses at the scene immediately identified Kyren Lacy's vehicle. On January 8th, 2025, Kyren Lacy was charged with negligent homicide, felony hit and run with death, and reckless operation of a vehicle. He was not on the list of players invited to the NFL scouting combine when it was released in mid-February. About a month after his arrest, Kyren Lacy's NFL dream was essentially over. A grand jury hearing was scheduled for April 14, 2025 to determine if the case would proceed to trial, but Kyren Lacy never made it to that hearing. On the night of April 2025, 2 days ahead of his scheduled grand jury appearance, Kyren Lacy, at the age of 24, led authorities on a pursuit before crashing in Spring, Texas near Houston. When deputies removed Lacy from the car to take him into custody, they found him with a gunshot wound and he was pronounced dead at the scene by emergency responders. They ruled that Kyren Lacy took his own life. The Harris County Sheriff's Office said deputies had responded to a weapons disturbance call at a home where Lacy had discharged a firearm into the ground during a verbal argument with a family member when they attempted to stop his vehicle. He fled, leading to the chase. A 24-year-old kid with his whole life ahead of him, gone. A 78-year-old military veteran, gone. 2 families destroyed. It's an absolute tragedy on every level. And that's where the story stood for 6 months. Kyren Lacy passed before he could stand trial, which means legally speaking, he was never convicted. He's presumed innocent. Herman Hall's family never got their day in court. There was no trial, no jury verdict, no legal closure. Fast forward to October of 2025, and that's when Kyren Lacy's attorney, Matthew Ori, went on a local Louisiana TV station, HTV10 in Houma, and dropped what seemed like a bombshell. Ori presented security camera footage that he said showed Lacy's vehicle roughly 70 yards behind the other cars at the time of the crash. The vehicle showed the collision happening, and then several seconds later, you see a green Charger appear in frame, slow down, and drive around the accident scene. Ori's argument was simple and powerful, that while Lacy passed 4 vehicles in a no passing zone, he returned to the proper lane with enough time to have not been responsible for the collision. Ori argued the footage contradicted initial findings from Louisiana State Police that led to negligent homicide charges against Kyren Lacy. Ori told the TV station that is not how the story was painted, never. He also claimed that the crash report from the district attorney's office actually supported Lacy's defense. Ori said, citing the document, that the evidence submitted in the crash report does not support that Kyren Lacy should have known that his actions were the cause of the crash that happened approximately 72 yards in front of him. The HTV10 segment also showed body cam footage that Ori claimed showed a Louisiana State Police trooper appearing to instruct a witness on what to include in a written statement. The implication was clear. The police had manipulated the investigation to blame Lacy. This seemed like potentially exculpatory evidence. A young man had taken his life while facing charges, and now his attorney was saying there's proof that he was nearly a football field away when the crash happened. If true, that would be devastating. It would mean that Kyren Lacy passed away believing he was guilty of ending someone else's life when he may not have been responsible at all. And that's when ESPN personalities saw the video and reacted. On Monday Night Football, October 7th, 2025, Ryan Clark, former LSU player turned ESPN analyst, went on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt to discuss the attorney's video. And he didn't just discuss it, he made some very bold, very definitive statements. Clark posted on social media saying that Kyren Lacy was supposed to be on an NFL field this weekend. That made it important to say Kyren Lacy was innocent on ESPN before the night ended. His name and face were plastered everywhere when he was under investigated, so it's only right we say it now.
At some point throughout his career, I would expect to have said his name. So I'm gonna say his name tonight.
Amen.
Kyren Lacy was innocent.
On air, Clark stated,
Kyren Lacy was supposed to be in the NFL. Kyren Lacy was accused of something and being investigated for something that he didn't do, and he died having to live with the guilt and the consequences of a guilty man knowing he was innocent.
notice how he didn't say may have been innocent, not there are questions about the evidence, but definitively he didn't do it and he was innocent. But Clark went even further than that. He said
It recently was discovered that he was 72 yards away from the crash, that police and state policemen tried to coerce and doctor and use ways to manipulate statements that put this young man behind bars.
think about what he just said there. Coerce and doctor and use ways to manipulate statements. Those are accusations of criminal misconduct against law enforcement, evidence tampering, witness coercion. These aren't minor allegations. These are career-ending, potentially criminal accusations. Clark continued.
There were so many stations that ran the fact that he was being investigated, so I wanted to make sure here with Scott we could say that he was an innocent man and at least know that he has that as he rests.
Scott Van Pelt was equally emotional.
I can't recall ever seeing something that made me react viscerally to the point that I felt like my hands were trembling.
Van Pelt said of Lacy that
There's video that shows that this is not at all what happened, and that young man took his life.
and it wasn't just Clark and Van Pelt. Pat McAfee also reacted strongly after seeing the attorney's claims, saying Lacy didn't do it and we gotta get that shit right. Now, I want to pause here and say I understand why they reacted this way. If you watch that video from the attorney without any other context, it does look bad for the prosecution. You see a crash happen, and then several seconds later, a green car appears. If that's all you know about the case, you might think, wait, how could he have caused this if he was this far away? And there's an emotional component too. Ryan Clark openly admitted that he knew Kyron Lacey personally.
In full transparency, y'all, I knew Kyron Lacey personally.
This wasn't just some random player he was talking about. This was someone he had a relationship with, someone from his alma mater, a young man who took his own life. So I get the emotional reaction. What I don't get is how three major ESPN personalities, people who are supposed to be media professionals, saw one video from a defense attorney and immediately declared it the definitive truth, accused police of crimes, and didn't bother to wait for any response from law enforcement or check if there was more to the story, because that's what we did. And believe me, there was a lot more. Less than 24 hours after ESPN's coverage, Louisiana State Police dropped their response, and it was comprehensive. On Tuesday, October 8th, LSP released an 11-minute video that includes surveillance footage, witness statements, and a detailed explanation of their investigation. The footage showed Lacey's bright green Dodge Charger speeding southbound but in the wrong lane, passing several vehicles and even a loaded 18-wheeler in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. In the video, State Police showed that the Charger then returned to its proper lane, immediately braking, and then you hear the sound of a crash. Here's what made the LSP video so damning. It didn't just show the attorney's angle, it showed the full context. Yes, Lacey's car was 70-something yards away when the actual collision happened, but what the attorney's video didn't show clearly was what happened right before that. Lacey's aggressive, illegal passing that forced other drivers to take evasive action. Louisiana State Police stated, since the incident occurred, the Louisiana State Police never reported that the green Dodge Charger impacted any of the involved vehicles. However, all evidence collected supports the conclusion that Lacey's reckless operation of the green Charger in oncoming traffic triggered the chain of events involving the other drivers, ultimately resulting in the fatal crash. And here's the legal detail that ESPN's coverage completely missed. In Louisiana, a person can be guilty of vehicular homicide whether the death was caused proximately or caused directly, meaning a driver did not have to make contact with the vehicle to be at fault. In other words, you don't have to physically hit another car to be legally responsible for a fatal crash. If your reckless driving causes other drivers to take evasive action that results in a collision, you can be held liable. That's not some obscure legal technicality either. That's standard in most states. The LSP video also addressed the claims about coercing witnesses. They showed body camera footage of officers interviewing witnesses at the scene. On police body camera footage, witnesses immediately identified Lacey's vehicle, with one saying a green Charger caused all of this. Multiple witnesses gave consistent statements right at the scene before any alleged coercion could have taken place. Louisiana State Police said the Louisiana State Police is committed to providing a thorough and objective investigation grounded in science and supported by facts. While we recognize that external narratives may arise, often based on selective information, we urge the public to rely on the full body of facts. That's a pretty measured response to being accused of criminal misconduct on national television, don't you think? Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrow issued a statement saying the evidence is not disputed here. The DA's office was prepared to present the case to a grand jury that showed Kyron Lacey returning to his lane. However, that does not absolve Kyron Lacey of responsibility in this matter. Every witness identified the green Charger Kyron Lacey was driving as having put the events in motion that led to the head-on collision, which ended the life of 78-year-old military veteran Herman Hall. So to recap, within 24 hours of ESPN declaring Kyron Lacey was innocent and accusing police of misconduct, mind you, after Monday Night Football, which is where most people are watching the most ESPN and the most SportsCenter, law enforcement released comprehensive evidence showing that their investigation was thorough. Their conclusions were supported by extensive video evidence and witness testimony, and that Lacey's reckless driving had indeed caused the chain of events that ended the life of Herman Hall. And that's when the backtracking began. Pat McAfee said this on Wednesday.
We thought we had more context. Now more video has been made publicly available, and it shows even more context where Kyron Lacey is driving on the wrong side of the road and could have very easily made the case that he caused the car to swerve and caused the tragic accident. We apologize for adding any more heat and will continue to stay on top of the news breakings in this story because obviously it's tragically sad and involves an athlete's legacy.
Scott Van Pelt also apologized for the incomplete reaction on on SportsCenter.
I apologize for the incomplete reaction that aired on this show on Monday night.
And Ryan Clark, on Thursday's First Take, he issued a full apology.
On Monday night's Sports Center, I addressed the horrific car crash that took Mr. Hall's life, and also the subsequent tragic events that led to the death of Kyron Lacey. In full transparency, y'all, I knew Kyron Lacey personally, but nothing matters to me more than the truth. I always strive to do my best to mix authenticity with the most complete and up-to-date information available. I failed to do that on Monday night based on the subsequent evidence that has been released by the Louisiana State Police Department. I set the highest standards of fairness and, most importantly, righteousness in my work. I didn't meet that standard. It's always important to me that I gather all factual and important information to provide the complete story. That's a responsibility that I do not take lightly. And when discussed in real time on Monday evening, I failed to do so. And for that, I apologize.
So there you have it, less than 72 hours from Kyron Lacey was innocent to I failed to gather all the facts, from accusing police of criminal misconduct to apologizing for not having complete information, from definitive declarations to walking it all back. But here's where the story gets really interesting and really troubling. This isn't the first time Ryan Clark had to issue a public apology for rushing to a judgment or saying something inappropriate on ESPN. As a matter of fact, this is his third major public apology in 5 months. Let me walk you through this pattern because it's important to understand this isn't just one mistake. This is a trend. Back in May of 2025, Clark got into a heated feud with fellow ESPN analyst Robert Griffin III over WNBA players Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. RG3 made a video saying that Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark after the two women had an on-court incident.
Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. So where was this type of reaction last year when Angel Reese got chokeslammed by Alyssa Thomas of the Connecticut Sun? She got fouled so hard, they kicked Aaliyah Thomas out the game with a flagrant 2 foul. What did Angel Reese do? Nothing. You know why? The reaction was different because of who did it. And there is a lot of history there with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese.
And look, this is a fair take, but Clark didn't just disagree with RG3's take, he made it personal. I mean, really personal. Clark responded on his podcast by saying this.
The one thing we know about RG3 is he's not having conversations at his home about what black women have to endure in this country, about what young black women and athletes like Angel Reese have had to deal with being on the opposite side of Caitlin Clark's rise and ascension into stardom. RG3, when is the last time within your household you've had a conversation about what she's dealing with? You haven't been able to do that because in both of your marriages, you've been married to white women.
Yeah, he went there. He brought up RG3's wife and his previous marriage, using them as evidence that RG3 couldn't properly understand or comment on black women's experiences. RG3 responded on social media saying, Ryan Clark didn't like my take on Angel Reese hating Caitlin Clark. That's fine. Disagreement is part of the game. But instead of debating my point, he personally attacked me and my family. The backlash was swift, as it should be. Clark eventually apologized, but the damage was done. Clark later said, I shouldn't have brought his wife into the equation, even though in my mind, before speaking about her, I processed as much as I could to speak of her in a way that was positive, trying to make sure it only illustrated a point about the way he approached Angel Reese. And in that, in some ways, to some people, I probably missed the mark. Probably missed the mark is putting it lightly. You brought a colleague's wife into a sports debate and used his interracial marriage as a weapon against him. That's not missing the mark, that's completely crossing the line. But just a few months later, in September of 2025, Clark was back in hot water with another colleague. Peter Schrager is one of the most respected NFL analysts in the business. As a matter of fact, as a person that does sports talk myself, I really have a lot of love and respect for the way Peter Schrager handles his business. I appreciate his takes, I appreciate his humility, I enjoy his energy, and I'm honestly happy for the guy for getting to the place that he's at today. He spent years at the NFL Network before ESPN signed him to a big deal earlier in 2025. He's known for his work ethic, his connections around the league, and his analysis. The guy never played professional football, but that's never stopped him from being excellent at his job. On the September 5th episode of Get Up, the crew was discussing the performances of Cowboys receiver CeeDee Lamb and Eagles receiver AJ Brown from Thursday Night Football. When Peter Schrager offered his perspective on the debate, Clark dismissed prefaced it by saying this.
We shouldn't do this on TV, and so I apologize if people think this is rude. That's the non-player.
Oh, stop.
Schrager was clearly not having it.
Don't belittle me like that.
Clark didn't back down. Instead of apologizing immediately, he doubled down in the moment, telling Schrager not to get mad and to let him finish. This was awkward as hell to watch. Mike Greenberg had to step in and cool things down, but apparently it got worse off camera. Clark later apologized on Twitter, saying, "Today I had an interaction with my colleague Peter Schrager, both on and off the air, that I regret. I have apologized to Peter and taken accountability with ESPN leadership." Note that phrase, both on and off the air. Front Office Sports reported that sources told them that Clark's confrontation with Schrager continued off air and led to an uncomfortable confrontation on the set of Get Up. So not only did Clark belittle Schrager on live television using the lazy "you didn't play" argument, but there was apparently more drama behind the scenes that got uncomfortable enough that ESPN leadership had to get involved. So let's count it up. In May of 2025, Ryan Clark had to apologize to Robert Griffin for bringing his wife into a sports debate and using his interracial marriage against him. On September of 2025, he had to apologize to Peter Schrager for belittling him on air and an off-air confrontation that required ESPN leadership involvement. In October of 2025, he had to apologize for declaring that Kyron Lacey was innocent, accusing police of criminal misconduct, and failing to gather all the facts before making definitive statements on national television. 3 major public apologies in 5 months. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. I even said it in my previous video on the subject a month ago. As one media analyst pointed out, there's only so many times you can screw up and apologize before ESPN decides your talent is not worth the headache. And that analyst also noted something really important. Clark's suggestion to Schrager that a non-player can't comment on gameplay runs counter to what ESPN does across the board with a range of talent that never played the game. Think about it. If ESPN actually operated on Clark's non-player principle, they'd have to fire Mike Greenberg, Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon, Stephen A. Smith, Mina Kimes, and a huge portion of their talent. These are some of ESPN's biggest names, and none of them played professional sports. But according to Clark's logic, their opinions don't matter? It's absurd, and it shows a fundamental lack of respect for colleagues and for the profession of sports journalism. Let's put all that aside, because I want to take a moment to discuss the real victims here. The people that got hurt by this the most start with Herman Hall and his family. A 78-year-old veteran lost his life. His family is grieving. And in all of ESPN's coverage about whether Kyron Lacey was treated unfairly, Herman Hall barely got mentioned. His life mattered. His service mattered. His family's grief matters. They deserved better than to have his death turned into a hot take debate. Up next, you have Kyron Lacey. Whatever the legal truth of his culpability, a young man took his life. He was 24 years old with his whole life ahead of him. That's a tragedy regardless of guilt or innocence, and his memory deserved better than to be used as a vehicle for rushed, incomplete reporting. Of course, we have to mention Kyron Lacey's family. Imagine having to grieve your son, and then watching national media personalities declare him innocent based on incomplete information, giving you hope that maybe he wasn't responsible, only to have that hope crushed 24 hours later when more evidence comes out. That's cruel, even if it wasn't intentional. And we wouldn't be able to make a complete video if we didn't discuss the Louisiana State Police officers. They were accused on national television of coercion, evidence tampering, and witness manipulation. Those are career-destroying, potentially criminal allegations, and they were made without verification, without reaching out for comment, without any attempt to get the other side of the story. All available evidence suggests they conducted a thorough investigation with extensive video evidence and witness testimony. They deserved better than to be publicly accused of crimes without any proof. And finally, you can even say that the public was a victim of all this. We as viewers and sports fans deserve accurate information. We deserve media that takes the time to verify before making bold claims. We deserve better than being told something is definitively true on Monday, only to find out on Thursday that it wasn't true at all. Look, I'm not here to pile on Ryan Clark unnecessarily. The man apologized. Pat McAfee apologized. Scott Van Pelt apologized. They own their mistakes, and that counts for something. But apologies don't fix the damage. Herman Hall's family family still has to read about their loved one's death being debated on social media. Louisiana State police officers still had their integrity questioned nationally, and the next time ESPN makes a bold claim about a breaking story, viewers are going to remember that they got this one really, really wrong. Kyron Lacey's situation is tragic on every level. 2 lives lost, families grieving, a career that never got to happen, and in the middle of that tragedy, ESPN made it worse by rushing to judgment, making unfounded accusations, and treating a defense attorney's video as the definitive truth without doing basic verification. And here's the thing about Ryan Clark specifically, this is his 3rd major apology in 5 months. May 2025 with RG3, September 2025 with Peter Schrager, and October 2025 with Kyron Lacey. At what point does a pattern become a problem that requires more than apologies? This should be a wake-up call not just for ESPN, but for sports media as a whole. In the race to be first, you have to have the hottest take to generate the most engagement, but we cannot forget basic journalism. It's important to verify before you publish. Get all the sides of the story. Understand the legal nuances before making declarations. Be aware of your biases and conflicts. Wait for complete information before accusing people of crimes. And when dealing with serious matters, criminal charges, loss of life, people's reputations, treat it with the gravity it deserves. Because these aren't just stories. These aren't just content opportunities. These are real people's lives. Herman Hall's life mattered. Kyron Lacey's life mattered. Their family's grief matters. And they all deserved better than what sports media gave them. ESPN got this one wrong. The question is, will they learn from it? Or will we be back here in a few months talking about another rushed judgment and another apology? Based on the pattern we've seen over the past 5 months, 3 apologies from the same person about 3 different incidents, I'm not overly optimistic, but I hope I'm wrong. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. I hope we could have a respectful debate about it in the comment section. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.